One Punch Man just dropped the funniest chapter of the year. Move over, Saitama, because this time, King is the main character. The cover page of One Punch Man chapter 189, titled Blade Test, features our brand new swordswoman, Yuta, who has absolutely taken the fandom by storm. And for good reason. I mean, this is a gorgeous character design. Last we left off, Atomic Samurai was confronting King inside a sushi place, eager to test the strength of the world's strongest man. Hearing a sort of rumbling noise, Atomic Samurai became more alert. Observing the scene unfold from a distance, Atomic's top disciples could also hear the start of the King engine, which could only mean one thing: King is in battle mode. Atomic was happy to see that King is quick to understand the situation, and if that was the case, then King should step outside with him. He would then speak to the man directly by asking him if he was really strong. Atomic admitted that he had never confirmed the extent of King's strength for himself. With food still in his mouth, King recognized that Atomic had come here to confirm if the rumors were true. The samurai then told his fellow hero to speed things up. That was unless he planned on fighting him here. But before we go any further, if you love shonen action like we do, we've got something new for you to check out thanks to this video sponsor, Dislight. Unlike most mobile games, Dislight has a strong narrative focus thanks to an ongoing urban myth comic that tells the story of this world. Here, great portal structures, the miracles, have given people called espers the powers of mythical gods. You get to read a cool action comic with a beautiful cel-shaded art style that stands out from most mobile games. Then you build your squad of characters from your new favorites, like wild biker girl Odin, dignified butler Anubis, the classy Nut, and adorable Heket. Dislight has a ton of reimagined classical gods to choose from. With each version update, Dislight releases a new update event with new characters and their stories. These independent stories not only allow you to get to know new characters more intimately, but they also serve as windows into the vast and intricate world of Dislight. And right now, they're running a limited time event called Endless Summer. It's focused on the tale of Jiao Tu, a Chinese goddess who has been ensnared by an endless cycle on one radiant summer day. Join Dislight today by clicking the download link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on screen. Use our code FIGHTWITHGODS to get 5 free draws and massive in-game rewards. Fight with gods and fight for infinite possibilities. But while you're trying to pick your best Esper, we've got a chapter to go over, so leave us your pick in the comments. King tried to tell the swordsman to wait a moment, but in his panic, began to choke on the food he was just eating. This forced him to bang on his own chest while extending his chopsticks. Atomic's eyes went wide with disbelief at what he saw King do. Yayan could not believe that King would be so reckless. Okame Itachi could barely speak, and Bushidrill expressed that King could end up dead if he underestimates their master like this. To Atomic Samurai, at least one of the rumors had been confirmed. King was indeed incredibly brave and had balls of steel. Atomic Samurai wondered if the strongest man truly believes that he can handle his expert swordsmanship with just a pair of chopsticks. Which King totally doesn't believe, but he was not about to tell this guy otherwise. From there, Atomic decided to demonstrate his own skill with the help of an apple. Tossing the fruit into the air, he rapidly moved his sword in its direction. Then he tossed the apple in King's hands. And just like that, the apple had been split up more than a Rubik's Cube. Seeing this only made the King engine rev up more. He really did not like what happened to the apple and feared the same happening to him. With a now darkened expression, Atomic Samurai expressed that he would only say it one more time. He wanted King to step outside. Okame Itachi would mention how pushy their master was being today. They could only wonder if he planned on provoking King until he shows his true power. Eventually, they all made their way to a nearby park. Parallel to his opponent, Atomic Samurai expressed his desire for them to not waste much more time. With a wicked expression on his face, Atomic Samurai believed that the best way for them to truly measure King's skill would be for him to pretend to be a monster and have King attack him like that. King just stared at the man. He wondered why the hero felt the need to force him to go through with this. He really was not a fan of pushy guys like Atomic. He could not believe that the samurai was approaching him with all these doubts when he didn't know anything about him to begin with. But it seemed as though the King engine had been running so ferociously that even his hat flew off his head. Thinking of Atomic's question of his strength as he watched him unsheath his blade, King internally admitted that he's not. In fact, he's weak. All he wanted to do right now was scream out an apology. Seeing the weapon drawn, King prayed to be saved. And as he did, King himself began to take on a rather unsettling demeanor and expression. It seemed as though King was matching Atomic's monstrous presence tenfold. Looking at this display, Iayon felt as though King was full of openings. But then, a second later, he corrected himself to say that no, King has no openings. Okame Itachi wasn't so sure about that. They saw plenty of openings, but Bushido corrected this thinking by saying that King is only making it appear as if he's full of openings. That if you look closely, King's entire body is shaking with minute twitches. That beneath his skin is a concentrated mass of killing intent. Iayon concluded that the whole thing was a trap. Countless feints on top of countless feints. Bushido was certain that if someone dashes in without care, they'll be hit by a brutal counterstrike. That there was no doubt that their master was well aware of this fact, and it was why he hadn't yet moved. King continued to exert this same sort of pressure. Atomic, meanwhile, prepared himself with his sword fully drawn. There was a dead silence between them for a while, but eventually, Atomic Samurai piped up, saying that he doesn't want to spend too much time sizing each other up since it's boring. With a serious look on his face, he wondered how the so-called strongest man would handle him once he began his assault. Hearing this marked a shift in King's approach as well. Yelling out in fury, King told Atomic Samurai that this was more than enough. He wondered if the foolish samurai had forgotten that today is Tuesday. Atomic was confused. Now pointing over the man's shoulder with a devious smile, King emphasized the fact that one of Atomic's disciples had already realized the reality of their situation. King was pointing directly at Iayon. Atomic didn't move, but looked in the direction as well. Iayon, meanwhile, had no idea what King was talking about. But having said this, King didn't believe that there was any need to continue speaking at all. From there, he turned his back to the samurai and began walking away. He'd tell Atomic that if he insists on fighting, they'll have to do it another time. But Atomic was not satisfied. He demanded to know what the hell King was talking about. Because of this, King looked at Atomic like he was talking to the backside of a mule. From there, he began to break down the completely true and totally scientific reason why them fighting today could not be the case. Apparently, the atmosphere is comprised of 80% nitrogen and 20% oxygen. But of course, there were also things like carbon dioxide, methane, helium, calcium, and Leteron Paldot. However, one of the most trace elements, Anga Watson, is not as well known, and certainly not because he just made it up on the spot. King further explained that Anga Watson reacts with the polylesms contained in ionizing radiation, causing what is famously known as the organophose phenomenon. And of course, as I wrote this script, it's not like all these words had red correction lines under them. But King did not stop there. He would also point out the fact that last Thursday, there was a full moon, which meant that today, at exactly noon, it changed into a dual squat phase. Admittedly, some people like himself, who have their antennas out regularly, have already noticed the truth. The fact that it has begun. Atomic thought to himself for a while. No matter how much he tried, he simply had no idea what King was talking about. But noticing his pursuer's uncertainty, King did his best to break things down into simpler terms. Because certainly the sword wielder had to have at least heard of the Dolzenga Bring reaction before. But collectively, Atomic Samurai and his three top disciples had no idea what King was talking about in the slightest. Still with his back turned and prepared to walk away, King would simply conclude that the two of them fighting here would certainly bring about a major catastrophe. Again, he'd say that they should handle this duel of theirs another day. But again, Atomic Samurai was not satisfied and told King to wait. They were not done here. But King was adamant. He did not want to cause any needless casualties. Especially given the current state of the world, he knew that they both had something more important that they should be doing rather than fighting one another. After all, the two of them were heroes. But Atomic Samurai wasn't so easily turned away. With intensity in his eyes, he would tell King to wait. Now sweating profusely, King realized that there truly was no way of escaping this situation after all. Thinking to himself, he wondered if by coming clean now about everything, they'd let him off the hook. But he knew he'd probably get punched for that. At the very least, it would be better than being sliced up. King began to try and speak again and was on the verge of telling the truth. But Atomic Samurai interrupted him. He had had enough of this. He figured it was just as King said and admitted that he was wrong. King was relieved and was surprised that his ploy had actually worked, but Atomic Samurai still had one final request to ask of the world's strongest man. Once more, he would reveal an apple. He'd ask King to please cut the apple for him. To this, King would admit that he's just an amateur with swords, however, but Atomic insisted that it didn't matter. Ultimately, he possesses a bit of a strange skill. It's sort of like palm reading. By merely watching someone while they cut an object with a sword, he could accurately read what kind of life they had led up until that very moment. This was a sort of test he had used before accepting the 3 disciples behind him. He was very curious how a man of King's caliber would cut the apple. Now handing the sword over to King, he'd yet again ask the man to cut the apple. That was his final request. Atomic watched the scene unfold intensely. Eventually, King finally made his move and grabbed hold of the sword. The King engine began yet again, and his expression shifted as he looked towards the fruit with the weapon within his grasp. And grasp he did. In fact, it looked as if that was all he did. A minute passed, then more than 2, then close to 3 by the time he put the weapon down. Each of the sword wielders wondered with astonishment why King had put down the weapon. King's face, although still intense, was now completely calm. And with that, he took his leave, not saying a word and walking away from them all. The truth was, he couldn't unsheath it. His arms were at their limit from just maintaining that pose, and being watched so intensely by all of them made him super nervous. King was certain that he would get busted if he keeps bluffing like this. He had nothing left to give. He was certain that it was all over. There was no doubt in his mind that Atomic Samurai was glaring at him from behind. He was so scared that he couldn't even bring himself to turn around. After pausing for a moment, he decided that he'd try to just head straight home like this. And so he did. King left them all behind, which totally confused the 3 disciples. With the apple and sword in his past, King left them all with their own thoughts. The disciples were in dismay after seeing King leave without having done anything. Iayon called out to the master, wondering what this could possibly mean. But Iayon was even more stunned when he saw his master's face. Atomic Samurai was sweating profusely. Atomic conceded that he couldn't even see King's swordsmanship. His series of movements, Atomic could not see any of it at all. Just like he had seen from Master Nichiren just before, the apple had not even realized that it had been cut. He believed that King had performed a supernatural feat, that he had sliced the blade between the atoms of the apple. Atomic could not believe that there was another swordsman capable of such a thing. But this was even beyond that, because the blade itself had not even realized that it had been unsheathed. Just like I'm sure you subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, faster than I could even upload this video. Continuing to sweat, Atomic Samurai realized that if he too had revealed an attack that surpassed even the Atomic Slash, he would also remain silent. It was as if King had cut straight through their suspicious stares too. The strongest man had made his point masterfully. Atomic then recalled King's claim of being an amateur with swords. He had said this despite being in a league all his own, above even the greatest swordsman on the planet. King was truly an outrageous sort of monster. Atomic began to laugh loudly. It had been quite a while since he had faced such shame. Although I wonder about that considering how dirty Black S and Golden S did him during the Monster Association arc. Atomic had come to the conclusion that now wasn't the time for him to be testing others. King had revealed a whole new world of power to him, one that made him realize that he himself was still a total amateur. Atomic then said the names of his faithful disciples. From here on out, Atomic Samurai intended to redo his own training from scratch. He was well aware that the road ahead of him was bound to be one of great hardship, but with a look of frustration and determination, he questioned if they would still follow him despite it all. Their faith remained unwavering. They were more than willing to do so. King, meanwhile, continued walking home. He realized that they weren't coming after him after all, so he planned on buying some stomach medicine and heading home right after. But after this declaration, Atomic Samurai would speak to his disciples in regards to another matter. He'd speak of the fact that among the high-ranking heroes close to them, there was someone who works to overcome their own worthlessness by shedding blood and tears. They needed to be sure that that person doesn't get to laugh at them in the end. Now, if you're confused by his words here or who he's talking about, let me help you. As he ranks 2, 3, and 4 A-class heroes, there's only one hero that's above these guys besides the S-class, and that is Sweet Mask. Unbeknownst to Atomic Samurai, these 3 are actually investigating Sweet Mask at the moment, on account of his suspicious monstrous behavior during the raid on the Monster Association. However, Sweet Mask made quite a scene in front of the S-Class heroes when they all met on the surface of the final battlefield. Infuriated by Darkshine's self-pity, Sweet Mask laid into him with a flurry of kicks. He was thoroughly disgusted by what he saw and told the coward to just go home. At the time, Atomic Samurai mocked the idol hero in his head for having previously begged Tatsumaki over the radio beforehand. But looking at Darkshine curled up in a ball, the anger of Sweet Mask boiled over even further. With blood streaming down from his eyes and mouth, he questioned if the man's weak mind did not make him angry. These words and display seemed to have a profound impact on Zombie Man, Prisoner, and some others. Atomic almost began to talk down to the A-Class hero, but Zombie Man convinced him not to. After seeing how Sweet Mask managed to rally his fellow heroes, something changed for Atomic Samurai. Of all people, he was the one to suggest that they cooperate and work together for the sake of a coordinated attack, which completely shocked his fellow heroes. Even Yayan recognized the major change of heart from his master, one that Master Nichiren later recognized too, and has raised his own interest in heroics. In the present, hearing his master's mention of this, Yayan's eyes went wide. Then with a smile, he agreed, and they all ventured forth together. King's impact on Atomic here is pretty major. If he is able to achieve this level of sword mastery that would allow him to move his sword between atoms, he will become exponentially more powerful. Then there's still the Sunblade for him to gain mastery over. So if you guys want to see a more in-depth video focused on Atomic Samurai and his crazy potential, let us know in the comments. From there, we would also receive a silly image of Saitama sharing a similar expression to the one Sweet Mask had while playing video games with King, as Okame Itachi and Bushi Drill wondered if that was the man their master was talking about, which of course, he was not. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.